Milling Through History presents The Birth of Talkies. On October the 6th, 1927, moviegoers were coming to see Al Jolsen's new movie, The Jazz Singer. Little did they realize, however, that upon entering the theater and seeing this movie, they were going to find a whole new spectrum of movie-going experiences that was going to occur for them, namely, the birth of sound. The Jazz Singer would revolutionize all of Hollywood and effectively bring about an end of the silent film era. And yet, while many people might recall that The Jazz Singer is the very first talkie film, many people might forget exactly what was the movie about. Well, The Jazz Singer revolves around a story about a young boy by the name of Jackie Rabinowitz, whose father was a cantor in a Jewish ghetto in New York City. When Jackie is found singing jazz music, his father tells him he is wasting his talent by singing what he calls modern music, and that he should instead be singing traditional Jewish music at home and in the ghetto. Jackie, not one to go ahead and listen to his father, had decided that he would run away, and, in doing so, changed his name to Jack Robin. He would find success in the theater, and his entire life would come full circle when he would return to New York City a major star. However, his own stardom would come into jeopardy as he would be informed that his father became gravely ill, and his own sense of duty and loyalty to family began to go ahead and create conflict within himself, as he wanted to be a star, but he could not turn his back on his own traditions. The climactic moment of the film comes when Jack has to make the final decision. Does he go ahead and act as the new cantor for the Jewish ghetto in New York City for Yom Kippur, or does he go ahead and star in his new performance on opening night, which happens to be Yom Kippur? In the end, he makes the decision to go ahead and follow his traditional roots, and the decision was a success, as shortly thereafter, he ends up starring in a whole new show called The Jazz Singer, and becomes a major success. What makes this film so unique, though, is the fact that there are many different parts of this film which are seen as being absolutely famous. It is the first film to go ahead and add lip syncing and speech into a film, along with having synchronized recorded music put into it. In fact, the first line audiences will actually hear being spoken from an actor was, wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet," from Al Jolsen. The moment audiences had heard that particular line, they became ecstatic. Never before had anything been done quite like that. The other part of the film, which becomes rather famous, is the fact that Al Jolsen, in performing as the jazz singer, will do this particular performance in blackface. Audiences at the time, though, did not think too much about the blackface, as it was a rather common thing found on film. What they reacted to instead was the fact that they had gone ahead and heard something absolutely different. They could actually hear Al Jolsen's voice and his singing abilities. As a result, when audiences left theaters, they were cheering and chanting Jolsen's name, wanting to hear more. Critics of the era were even extremely positive for the film. In fact, critical reviews from both Jewish and African American critics were highly positive, seeing that both communities were being well represented in their portrayals of the movie. However, modern criticism has gone ahead and looked at blackface, namely because of the racial stereotypes which have occurred. And yet, a number of film historians point out that the Warner Brothers, who were the individuals responsible for financing the movie, were using the jazz singer as a way to somewhat come to terms with their own rise in Hollywood, having been four Jewish brothers who had effectively needed to hide their own Jewish identity in order to be accepted by the mainstream WASP, that would be white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, community that was found throughout much of the United States. In the same way that Jack Robin would go ahead and have to hide his own Jewishness by portraying himself as being an African American singer. In doing so, audiences of the 1920s would have viewed him as being just a white man who is trying to go ahead and put on a performance by pretending to be a black man, not realizing that he was actually Jewish. In a day and age in which stereotypes were extremely common and just seen as widely accepted, the jazz singer itself attempted to go ahead and change the narrative of how one perceives talent. That it isn't so much a person's background or how they physically look, but it is what they are able to do that makes them a success. Ironically enough, though, The Jazz Singer, while being a highly popularized film and being responsible for the end of the silent film era, would find itself getting snubbed in one of the most ironic twists of fate. In a film that tries to go ahead and talk about merit over anything else, the very first Academy Award would go ahead and not put The Jazz Singer into its Best Picture category, citing the fact that as the only talkie going into the movie, into that particular category, all other films, which were silent at the time, would have otherwise been immediately defeated. As such, even though the film does break down certain barriers and attempts to lift up people's points of view on other walks of life, the Academy still holds it back, namely because it did not want to go ahead and break the mold that had already existed.